Perfect. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's session. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I know there are so many different time zones people are attending from, so really good to have you here today. Today, we have a much anticipated discussion on Runtime Fabric OpenShift. This has been uh, awaited for a long time, and today, Sparsh, who is the product manager for Runtime Fabric, has agreed to just talk to the community and show what innovation we are bringing into our new products, right? So we are going to have Sparsh and Edward introduce themselves in a minute. And before that, I'm just going to go through our community updates and give you a quick guidance on how to go through our meetup today. So I'm Sandeep Deshmukh. I work as a customer success architect in MuleSoft, along with my colleagues Royston and Angle. And Manik is another co-host that manages English meetup group along with me in Amer. Royston is based out of Singapore. He manages JPAC and Angle is in EMEA. For our agenda today, we're going to have quick guideline overview. Then Sparsh is going to go over what are the new capabilities that we have extended for Runtime Fabric OpenShift. Then Edward is going to do the demo, and then we're going to end our session today with a quick Q&A. So guideline, just pop your questions in the Q&A chat. Once we start the session today, I'll open up the Q&A tab for you to ask your questions. Any questions that will be relevant to the topic of discussion, I'll try to ask them at that time. All the rest of the questions will be asked at the end of the session. There will be a recording for this session, and it will be posted on YouTube channel. So if you have not looked at VirtualMuleys YouTube channel, please make sure to subscribe and watch the recording at the later time. Once the session is over, we're going to send you a feedback survey. Please share your feedback so that we are able to understand what topics are of interest for you and make sure that we are adding those topics and get the right speakers for you in the following events. Just since we have a product session today, I thought that it is a good time for us to just talk about what are the new product releases that have happened in the recent time. So we did launch MuleSoft RPA product on August 1st. So as you know, now you have the capability to use our RPA tool along with the existing integration capabilities. So make sure to check it out. It solves a lot of your automation needs, and if you have something that your new tool that you're looking for, MuleSoft RPA could be a good fit. It sits really well with MuleSoft Composer that was launched last year. So make sure you take a look at documentation after this session. We also added a new release for the Studio 7.13. So it makes it easier for you now to debug your shared flows, managing your data weave, and the documentation for Anypoint Exchange assets has become easier from Anypoint Studio. So if you have not upgraded your studio, do upgrade it and take advantage of this latest features. Okay, so starting with our session today, Sparsh and Edward, why don't you take a few minutes and quickly introduce yourself, starting with Sparsh.
Thank you, Sandeep. Hello all. Thank you for joining on all the different time zones. So, I'm Sparsh Agarwal. I'm the product manager for Runtime Fabric. And so far, you have been aware of kind of the different platforms that Runtime Fabric hosts. And today, I'll give you a peek of where we are going and what we are bringing to you with like Runtime Fabric on OpenShift support. And I'll pass
Edward.
it over to Edward.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Ed Pursuti. I'm a principal client solutions engineer here at MuleSoft. I've been here just over a year. Prior to that, I actually worked at Red Hat on the OpenShift platform. So that's why I'm doing the demo today, working with Sparsh. And I've been a part of this exciting release for us. We're very happy to bring you Runtime Fabric on OpenShift and very excited to hear what everyone's interested in and what they want to see. So thank you very much for attending today.
Great, thank you, Edward and Sparsh. Sparsh, I'm going to hand it over to you. I'll take control of the slides and let me know once you need to navigate. Cool. Moving on to the
Sounds
next
good.
one. All right, over to
Okay.
you.
So essentially, what does it mean by like runtime fabric on OpenShift, essentially, right? So or why is it even important? I think a lot of people are aware of that OpenShift is a containerizing solution, and Runtime Fabric is essentially the medium to expand your mules to your particular environment. Like right now, you are able to deploy to EKS, AKS, GKE to kind of deploy mules within your ecosystem. But let's see, why is this even important, right? So, Sandeep, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so going back to the idea of why integration is still an important problem to solve, yes, through Cloud Hub and through other integration platforms that we have, it is great that enterprises are able to connect their applications, their own systems, but more and more we are kind of getting into this complex world of different products, and specifically when we talk about enterprises, each enterprise has like over 800 varied applications. And when we talk about applications, it's more about kind of a nascent term where it means a database, a particular website, a particular let's say legacy system, and all of those kind of need to be integrated together, and not all of them provide a common platform or a common language to work together. So even though there are all these platforms out there, there are still 71% of the apps which are not integrated. And when we talk about these integrations, we know that like about 69% of organizations are taking a top-down approach because they want to use this opportunity to kind of bundle their interior kind of silos and break through those silos and kind of create a more holistic solution, right? They don't want data to be stuck in one silo and not go to the other one. So it definitely is becoming a very prevalent aspect where they want a more sophisticated integrated solution, which is living within their own system, so that the data doesn't leave their trusted boundary. So going to the next slide, we'll see that where this, like what the problem statement comes out to be. Uh, since we all know that innovation has been going on in a very fast pace, just about 20 years ago, phone came out, and today it's become a very normal thing. The aspect of growing and innovating at speed becomes a very important aspect for any business to keep up with the market. And for any integrations with all these 800 apps, there needs to be a standardization of it. So essentially, the problem statement drills down to grow and innovate at speed, customers need standardized, integrated solutions that provide flexibility without compromising security. Because as soon as you have all these varied aspects or varied systems, there needs to be a common language as well as a security posture which works across. So I don't want my database to be so logged in that I'm not able to integrate with it, but also I don't want it to be open enough that anybody connects with it. So I need a fine line where I can connect all my integrations with that particular database, but also have a common platform to maintain that security posture. Like let's say I want to add Edward tomorrow to that database. So I should be able to add him in a common platform instead of going to 500 different platforms. Going to the next slide, we'll see that why Runtime Fabric and OpenShift is essentially a very good mix, and why it came to be. So a couple of months back or quarters back, Salesforce and IBM did realize this coming up problem, and they came up to this agreement that okay, we should work together to like bring each other's benefits to each other and kind of solve this problem for customers together, right? So essentially, there was a broader agreement between Salesforce and IBM, which is backing this whole initiative. So the Runtime Fabric on OpenShift is a very tightly built product, and there's a very kind of handheld approach taken towards this because we do see a lot of value that Runtime Fabric will bring to the IBM ecosystem and OpenShift will bring to the Salesforce ecosystem. And then going to the next slide. Uh, yes, so just reiterating what MuleSoft and Red Hat are important at individually, right? So MuleSoft is the leading enterprise integration platform, enabling world's largest digital transformations. Market leader in enterprise iPaaS, full lifecycle API management and automated automation, and Compose APIs to promote usability, like universal API management. All of these the values are of MuleSoft. But what Red Hat brings to it is the hybrid cloud platform. So 3,800 hybrid cloud platform clients, adding more than 1,000 clients in the last year, 20% higher application developer productivity, 636% ROI over 5 years. So when we talk about like infrastructure as kind of the abstracted layer, OpenShift or Red Hat becomes the enterprise leader in that aspect. So going to the next slide, we'll see that like MuleSoft is the integration platform powerhouse. Red Hat is an open source solution powerhouse, essentially for integration. So what happens when you put them together? So it directly solves the problem statement which we are trying to solve. Quickly create modern containerized solutions with flexible deployments on premise or in any cloud. And given the security posture or the focus to security that Red Hat provides, the cluster level security management becomes very easy, and it becomes the first tenet of Red Hat OpenShift platform. So going back to the original problem set that we started with is the customers need to grow and innovate rapidly, and they want to work with their complex integrations, but they also want to make sure that the infrastructure is kind of wrapped around in a very secure boundary. So this together approach makes this particular problem very easily solvable. So going to the next slide. Yes. Sorry, one back. Yeah. So just a pictorial representation of, I think we are missing one. Yeah, this one. Okay. So going to the pictorial representation, right? Cloud Hub and why, like where Cloud Hub and Runtime Fabric kind of vary a little bit is essentially on the top left corner, the diagram that you're seeing, on the right, you have MuleSoft Cloud, and on the left, you have a customer's trusted boundary. And the data leaves customer's trusted boundary to go to the Cloud Hub environment and then come back. So the integrations that live in Cloud Hub environment kind of have this a sense of kind of data leaving their trusted boundary. And a lot of time customers don't want that. Like however the use case may be, they just don't want the IP or the data to leave the trusted boundary. So Runtime Fabric becomes a natural choice for them. But also the thing is, Runtime Fabric only works on container solutions because that is the future aspect of kind of managing uh, any kinds of workloads. But people do still have VMs that they want to take use of, and for VMs we need a containerizing solution, and and more we are seeing companies moving towards that naturally. Like 92% of industries rely on containerized solutions for future. Even though if they have VMs today, they want to containerize them and manage in that particular manner because of the Kubernetes ecosystem flexibility that it brings. Like once you make some solution a Kubernetes native solution, the possibilities are endless just because of the investment all the companies, including MuleSoft, who are contributing back to the open source community and contributing back to the Cloud Native Foundation. Just for example, our Flex Gateway just became one of the inclusions in the Gateway group of Cloud Native functionalities. So going to the next slide, we'll see where OpenShift fits into this. So over here, now we are looking at customers who have their VMs or workloads deployed in multiple clouds, whether it's AWS, whether it's Google, whether it's Azure. And until now, what they had to do was they had to manage all of these VMs separately and kind of have a containerizing solution on top of them to finally deploy mules in those environments. What OpenShift lets you do is it first of all gives you an enterprise grade and containerizing solution with security first architecture, as well as it gives you a common control plane to build a cloud agnostic ecosystem. So you don't need to go to essentially AWS or Google or Azure or all these different varied portals to manage your infra. And you don't even have to learn about kind of individual platforms. So it kind of abstracts away that platform level detail and gives you one control plane, and you just go to OpenShift and you manage the underlying infrastructure in AWS, Google, Azure. So it kind of disconnects the aspect of infrastructure manager versus an application manager. And application manager can kind of just work with Runtime Fabric and OpenShift and kind of manage their application instead of dealing with the core aspects of kind of infrastructure details. And being a security first architecture, OpenShift kind of makes sure that all the security aspects of RBAC or secret management or essentially like scanning, all of those are inbuilt in the OpenShift ecosystem, irrespective of the platform it is. So whether it's AWS, Google, or Azure, you'll find a streamlined security first architecture in OpenShift. So going to the next slide, we'll see a couple of values that this particular um, merger, essentially this particular kind of solution brings into value, right? So until now, we all know that EKS, AKS, and GKE are fantastic solutions, but it takes time to build a full end-to-end MuleSoft kind of application deployment over there, because you have to work with the networking, storage, security, all those aspects. So definitely time to value. And over here, OpenShift is bringing over 200 certified operators to automate deployment and management of Kubernetes workloads. MuleSoft Exchange, we already know, has over 397 out-of-the-box connectors. So together, MuleSoft and OpenShift bring in the respective ecosystem of operators and connectors, which makes this integration on a hybrid cloud very easy. And MuleSoft accelerators will work analogous on this particular ecosystem as well. So you can just think of OpenShift as a wrapper on top of your infrastructure, and once you deploy Runtime Fabric on it, all of the aspects of MuleSoft, whether it's an accelerator, whether it's any other product, it works analogous on this particular entity as a whole. So going to the next slide, another value which this particular combination brings is basically application modernization. Apart from just the universal API management that MuleSoft brings, you can also reduce the operational cost, complexity, and you can reduce the time of application development as well as workload portability. Like until now, the promise was that MuleSoft, when you go to Runtime Manager, you can port your applications from one deployment method to another. But what about kind of how do I make sure that the internal infrastructure which is it is deployed on is also easily portable? Like I should not have to go and kind of recreate my environment in let's say Azure if I want to move from AWS to Azure. And OpenShift brings in that value, like abstracting away the infrastructure layer. It makes it very easy to kind of be like develop in a cloud agnostic manner. And I think I've already referred to security aspect as being one of those kind of key things for OpenShift. So all of this together kind of makes the development process very easy and very streamlined, kind of maximizing the value API developer or application developer can kind of get out of this end-to-end solution. So going to the next slide. Yeah, standardization. So going back to the connectors and the operators that OpenShift and MuleSoft respectively provide. One of the values with Kubernetes is the dynamic ecosystem as well as how big the open source community is, but that's also sometimes a problem because now you have so many solutions out there, everybody pitching for themselves that you don't know which one to go for. And if you go for that, you don't have a common kind of support line to get help with that. So that is where MuleSoft becomes the common support for all the integration connectors. Like doesn't matter if what connector it is, you have the whole MuleSoft community to help you with that. So we add a layer of standardization on top of it. Same way, OpenShift provides a standardization of all the open source operators. So you can probably find more open source operators out there which are still compatible with the ecosystem but not certified, because OpenShift goes through the pain of kind of getting certain most used operators certified so that they can add them to their support channel. So and they have over 200 of those right now, and they are supporting more and more going forward. So adding this layer of enterprise standardization on top of these open ecosystems, both for integrations and for operators or Kubernetes ecosystem, it kind of builds that trust with the customer that, okay, if I build this, then it is going to be supported over time. I can deploy my production workloads on it. I don't have to just kind of learn everything by myself and be my own boss, which kind of provides that good enough balance that I can choose to be cloud native and have the flexibility while having these enterprises back me up for any kind of production support. So going to the next slide, one of the biggest value which it brings into is the trusted ecosystem. So together, this kind of essentially, whether it's so IBM, as we go back to this particular solution came down to kind of Red Hat and MuleSoft because of IBM and Salesforce partnership. It comes down to that particular backing that all of these companies and respective people bring into this ecosystem, right? So even the support that we are referring to with OpenShift, it will be like once a customer gets an OpenShift license and they become how the licensing works is all the operators, certified operators, become supportable in their ecosystem. So unlike right now, when a particular third-party software is deployed on a runtime fabric cluster for EKS, AKS, or GKE, which is considered out of the support boundary for MuleSoft, it won't be the case with the runtime fabric on OpenShift. Because though it's out of the boundary of MuleSoft support, because MuleSoft support will stick to the integrations that we provide, OpenShift will have all of those third-party softwares and certified operators within their support boundary. So kind of together, this combination brings in that complete picture of a trusted ecosystem that customers can leverage to build an end-to-end solution. And with this, I'll hand it over to Edward to show us all the great things that we have been building.
Hey, Sparsh.
All right. Well, thank you, Sparsh.
Yeah. So, Edward, can we take one question? Sparsh, there was one question on when this will be available for existing customers to use. Are you able to answer that?
Yeah, so it is still on track for H2 of FY23, which is like Salesforce years runs from February to July and then August to January. It's a bit weird in that sense, but essentially it's still on track for H2 FY23, early H2 FY23. So that's still something which we are working towards.
Great. Thanks, Sparsh. Okay, Edward, you.
And Sparsh, there was another question, and maybe we should do this after the demo. But there's a question in the Q&A about Cloud Hub 2.0 and RTF. So would you rather address that after the demo?
Yeah, I think we can do that after it. Like there are very critical differences between the two, depending on the use case.
Okay. All right. And if you could just check the Q&A, and I'll get on the demo. All right. Okay, everyone. Again, my name is Ed Pursuti. Hopefully everyone can see my screen right now. If one of the other presenters could let me know for sure if you can see it.
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay. So again, I'm Ed Pursuti. I'm a principal solutions engineer here at MuleSoft. And I wanted to run through today actually deploying RTF onto the OpenShift platform. Now, I'm going to point out a couple of things here. In that the first thing is I have the operator installed locally. We will have it in the OpenShift catalog. And just to show you that, if we go to the operator hub in OpenShift and we search for Mule, you'll see that there is a runtime fabric agent out there, and it is in certified status. That's an older one that we had, but we will have a new one out there shortly when we release in GA. So when you go to install the operator, you're going to do it just like you would any other OpenShift operator, which is, of course, click it, click install, set the namespace, that sort of thing. All right. So now, if you've ever installed RTF before, you know that the first step is to tell the Anypoint platform that you want to install RTF. And it's going to give you some critical data there. So let's do that. I'm going to go into Anypoint platform here. I'm going to go into the Runtime Manager. And you'll see on the left-hand side, there is Runtime Fabrics. So I'm going to click that. And then I'm going to say create Runtime Fabric. And if you've done this before, then this is pretty much the same screen you're all used to and you've seen it. However, what you'll see now is there is a new option down here that says OpenShift Container Platform. So I'm going to click that and I'm going to hit next. In this case, because this is pre-GA, it's giving me a support prompt. But now what you'll notice now is it's going to give me instructions. Here's what you need to do to install RTF. So the first thing I'm going to do is it's going to say, all right, create the namespace for RTF. So we're going to do that. And let me make this font bigger so everyone can see. So I'm just going to follow the instructions. I'm going to create an RTF namespace. And it also says you need a key to get to the container registry. Now, if you're using local container registries, there's some things you might do differently here, and you may have had these containers pulled already. But in this case, I'm going straight to the MuleSoft registries. At this point, it would say go to operators, go to operator hub, and install the operator, as you saw in the catalog a minute ago. We've already got that done. So let's go to the next step here. I'll just go ahead and copy this because I know I need it. So I'm going to go to the operator hub. I'm going to go to my RTF namespace that we just created.
Hey, Edward, can you zoom into the browser? Just a request.
Better?
Yeah, much better. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks for telling me. I have a huge monitor and I can't see the chat right now. So now we're in the RTF namespace and we see that we've got the Runtime Fabric operator installed. So if you've dealt with operators before, you know what's going to happen here. It's exactly what you're expecting. I'm going to go into the operator. I'm going to see the provided API of a Runtime Fabric. I'm going to hit Create Instance. Now, we do have a form view, and we also have the YAML view. So in this case, the first thing it's going to say is, hey, you need that activation data. Now, if you notice, the activation data was given to me via the Anypoint Studio, or the Anypoint platform down here at the bottom. So I'm going to copy that. The next thing that I need to do is put my license in here. Now, I've done this a few times, so mine's like an autofill for me. And then the other thing that I'm going to do, because I'm running pre-release, is I'm going to change the registry name just a little bit to get to a pre-release registry. So this is not something you normally have to do. Again, it's something that I'm doing because I'm in pre-release. And then back to the form view. Typically, like I said, you'd come here to activation data, you'd set your license. If you wanted to manipulate agent settings like memory, CPU, and stuff, you can. And just to be sure, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that the license I pasted is correct. And let's create. All right. So now we've created this instance. If we go into our workloads, look at deployments, we now see we have our RTF agent, deployer, cluster IP service, etc. We go to pods, you'll see that's deploying. While these guys are deploying, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set up ingress. Now, in OpenShift 4.7 and up, there is an ingress operator already. So you don't need to deploy Nginx or something like that to do ingress like you did in older versions of OpenShift. So in this case, I'm going to use the RTF ingress template. Again, if you've installed RTF before, you've done this. It is in our instructions. So let's just take a quick look at that. And in this case, you'll see that I've created a very basic ingress template that is going to use the new OpenShift ingress class, which is just called default. And it's going to set up the host and the path and things like that using keywords. So I'm going to install that. All right. And then while RTF is doing its thing, We should be able to go back to the management center here now, and you'll see now we have RTF OCP out there. So the next thing that I need to do is associate with an environment. Again, this is standard. At this point, we're doing RTF stuff that we've always done. So I'm going to tell it sandbox, which is the environment I have. Go ahead and apply that. I've also taken the liberty of creating a namespace called RTF apps sandbox, which is where RTF will put my apps for this environment. So let's go ahead and deploy. I'm going to go applications, just like I deploy any other Mule application. Going to hit deploy application. In this case, I've already got a jar file and everything ready to go. I'm going to pick my deployment target of RTF OCP. I'm going to set the application name to CBR1, which is just this little content-based routing demo I've got. Runtime 440. The usual things, again, this is everything you've already seen with RTF. It just runs at OpenShift now. So deploy that. Oh, I didn't set the ingress, but typically I would set ingress right here. Now, note that for those of you who haven't seen this, things like app name are tokens. So they'll actually be replaced during the deployment process. All right. So if we look, we'll see my content-based routing application coming up here. And I'm going to go ahead and click into it. I'm going to go ahead and look at the logs and watch it coming up. So there's my application coming up and running. And of course, you know, if you're familiar with OpenShift, none of this will be unfamiliar to you. Like I said, it's pretty much, we've got RTF running in OpenShift installed via a Helm-based operator. So with that, I think that's the end of our demo. We've now deployed RTF. We've now deployed an application on top of RTF, all running on top of OpenShift 4.10.
Thank you, Edward. That was fast.
Sorry, it doesn't take long. I'm sorry.
That's great. So we have a few questions. We can get started. So first question is for Sparsh. Sparsh, is the support extended for on-prem installation for OpenShift? What are the different targets that customers use for OpenShift deployments?
Yep, that like great question, specifically when OpenShift is considered, given we are talking about infrastructure abstraction. One thing to understand is OpenShift has two solutions, right? Like it has cloud managed solution, it has self-managed solution. Self-managed can kind of be deployed on any of the VMs, whether it's the VM is living on-prem or whether the VM is in cloud. Like be it the Performance Plus solution, whether it's the OCP solution, whether it's the Kubernetes engine solution. So the answer is any of those self-managed solutions can be deployed in an on-prem VM cluster. Right now, the most adaptability that is out there and most ecosystem that is out there is for OCP. So yes, if there is an OCP-enabled on-prem cluster or an OCP-enabled VM cluster, whether it's on-prem or on cloud, Runtime Fabric will work on that. One of the key things that we are doing with this release is Runtime Fabric, as you saw over here, is an operator in the OpenShift ecosystem. And that's the value that Kubernetes brings, that this operator will work analogous to any platform or target that you bring, whether it's the 4 cloud managed services, which is ROSA, ARO. I think there's one Red Hat dedicated, and then there is one for Google. Like the same deployment pipeline that you see, the same installation pipeline that you see will work for all 4, as well as OCP and Platform Plus as a Performance Plus, as well as the Kubernetes engine, because the OpenShift control plane is still available for all of those. So the operator will still work analogous to them. And the deployment, how it will look like is of the application, when you go to Runtime Fabric or Runtime Manager in any point control plane, they will just list as different clusters. So like you have, if you install Runtime Fabric on Rosa as well as Runtime Fabric on OCP, which is on your own VMs, they will just appear as one and like two different similar things on the same drop down when you try to deploy your application from Runtime Manager. So there is not going to be an experience change from Runtime Manager perspective when you're deploying or managing your application, whether it is on OCP or on-prem or whether it's on Rosa.
Thanks, Parsh. I hope that answers the question.
Okay.
And I have another question. I think this could be Edward or Sparsh. Do we have provision for MuleSoft apps to reference config maps and secrets created in OpenShift? So either of you can answer.
Yes. So config maps not so much, but secret management for sure. So how it will go about is that even in this particular runtime fabric installation, right? Like if you would have seen the secret that Edward used for installation perspective, it was there in OpenShift Secret Manager, and that is where it picked it up from. So there are ways where, like currently, as somebody would do with EKS, AKS, GKE, the aspect is that like mules can kind of reference those particular aspects of it. But if we are talking about kind of the user journey or life cycle, how to manage that, it is something which cannot be managed from the any point monitoring any point platform. So there won't be something like I specify a config map and reference secret on the anypoint control plane, and that gets used. So config map is currently something which we are still looking forward towards in future aspects, and how we can kind of make sure we are not opening up this ecosystem completely and throwing off customers like in a very gray area. We are taking a very kind of uh, managed approach, so to speak, where instead of just letting the customer do what they want, which mostly ends up like in a painfully complex solution, as we know that 75% of Kubernetes solutions kind of fail. So that's why the approach that we're taking is a very handheld, certified, kind of supported approach. That even if config maps, when we are going to add support, it's going to be somewhat more like, okay, these are the few configurations that you can change. These are things which we are going to be able to help you with as you make changes over time. Because as we know, production workloads, nobody wants to mess with them. So it will be a nice balance to make sure we provide enough flexibility, but also don't open the can of worms. Currently, there is not a possibility to uh, like map config maps with mules in OpenShift.
Thanks. Hopefully that answers your question, Pramod. Next question is from Zenu. What are the scalability and replication features available with OpenShift release? What are the major differences with respect to EKS, GKE, and AKS? And is there any expectations on the Kubernetes expertise on the customer side?
Yes. So one of the values that OpenShift, like I'll maybe start a bit open and then go into the specificities which were brought up. Uh, the major difference with AKS, EKS, and GK essentially remains that those are purely uh, like two aspects. One, cloud lock-in. So anything which goes into EKS becomes very much easy affinity to AWS, but then you can't really connect things to like port over things to Google or AWS. It's just the cloud lock-in aspect. The other thing which is purely technical is now with EKS, it's a containerizing solution, right? So you don't get all the other cluster management life cycles with it, whether it's the update management, whether it's the application management. Like so, let's say you want 3 or 4 different views of your cluster. One purely from a security ops perspective, one purely from architectural point of view. You want to manage like the networking of it. So that becomes very, very hard. It's kind of a build your own solution kind of thing with EKS or AKS or GKE. With OpenShift, it's a very managed one. But again, OpenShift has both solutions. One is self-managed and one is managed. If you go towards OpenShift managed solution, then it becomes a very kind of easy flexibility that I myself, that I don't have to have the technical expertise of Kubernetes to the like nitty-gritties. I can just do clicks and buttons, and I have full support from OpenShift, so I don't need to have that level of Kubernetes expertise if I'm working with a managed OpenShift solution. But if I'm going towards OCP, which gives me more flexibility, then again I'll need a similar type of expertise that I would need with EKS. Another key point, a third one over there is EKS is a containerizing solution which kind of abstracts away uh, the VM solution, right? So if you work with EKS, you work with EKS. You can't control that. Okay, EKS runs on these particular EC2 instances. Now, if you already have a set of clusters, a set of VMs, whether it's an on-prem VM, EKS anywhere potentially you can install on your on-prem VMs, but right now EKS or AKS, they don't have solutions like that. So OpenShift OCP provides that. So you can take OpenShift OCP and put it on any VM solution, whether it's a EC2 instance, whether it's a Azure VM, whether it's Google Cloud Engine, Google Compute, whatever the VM solution may be, OCP can be deployed over there. So these three are the biggest tenets of how OpenShift adds a VM first managed cloud agnostic solution compared to EKS, AKS, and GKE, which are very much kind of convoluted and isolated solutions.
Thank you, Sparsh. So next question is from Valdez. What is the best practice to store secrets assigned to Mule apps using RTF on OpenShift? It's a major difference between CloudHub versus RTF and a migration issue when moving workloads. So do you want to
I
take
would.
that?
I'd actually like to talk to that one. Yeah.
Sure.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
comically, I was just typing an answer in the questions when you got to that. So the thing about secret management, especially when you're migrating between environments, if you started with an on-prem environment, the older style, you could use a domain project, which some people did. When you went to Cloud Hub, you had some secret management, and when you went to RTF, it was different yet again. So what we're seeing with most of our customers is I see two things, and this is something that I would recommend that you talk to your MuleSoft account team about, because we've seen this many times. One is if you have an external credential store like Vault or CyberArk or Azure Key Store, something along those lines, we make connectors in the Mule engine that will go and properly check out a secret, use it, and check it back in. And that is agnostic of what platform you're running on. So I highly recommend looking into a solution like that if your organization has it. And most organizations now do. So definitely check into that. The second option is to use your deployment pipeline, like your CI/CD pipeline. So as you're deploying apps, you're injecting the trust stores and credentials and things like that into them as they go through the pipeline. The only downside to that is that you do have to redeploy the apps when those change. Not a huge deal for some customers, but it is a thing. So those are really the two best options, rather than trying to tie back to a Kubernetes secret or a domain project or a Cloud Hub credential. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Advait. I guess that definitely helped. And if you have a follow-up question, please post it in the questions tab, and we can try to answer that. Sparsh, a question for you. What are the cost savings or the total cost of ownership compared to AKS, EKS implementations? Do we have that analysis?
So right now, we are still going through that exercise. Essentially, it's varying because sometimes, like, the question becomes very different, right? Because the customer base or who we are targeting kind of varies. So sometimes customers already have a EKS, AKS, GK expertise, and they don't have to build it in-house for kind of deploying mules, right? So sometimes it becomes a no additional cost at all. But let's say for in terms of pure pricing aspect, right? Let's talk about that. That what additional cost OpenShift will bring. Uh, so let's say you have a AWS environment, and instead of on-prem, you have your VMs in AWS. Now, the two costs which will, or three costs which will be there is definitely the AWS infrastructure cost. And then on top of it, the Mule licensing cost for all the Mule applications deployed, as well as the third cost which will be added over here will be OpenShift licensing cost and OpenShift licensing and services. So if you use the OpenShift managed solutions, which are ROSA, ARO, they have a packaged cost. So kind of ROSA, in ROSA's case, you don't have to like pay for infrastructure separately. All the pricing is bundled together, and you can go to the OpenShift link, ROSA link for that. But in case of OCP, it's a bit more broken down, where you'll have to pay for like a particular cost per core. Same way you pay for MuleSoft licensing, there will be OpenShift licensing cost for OCP, along with some additional costs associated with all the other services. So depending on if you use OpenShift routes or OpenShift, like all the other different features that they have, it kind of has an incremental cost depending on the usage, and that is how OCP kind of lets you build your own ecosystem. And compared to EKS, AKS, GKE, that is where they also have these broken down costs for infrastructures. So really, the OpEx cost kind of varies depending on where you want to go. So if a customer already has EKS expertise and still they want to go towards a VM solution, which becomes cloud agnostic, there will be an additional cost of kind of learning about OpenShift. So that's going to be the additional cost. But in terms of like operation or licensing, what we uh, like did some initial analysis on, and a regular like kind of an average size cluster, which is let's say five. I think it came down to 10 vCPUs or something like that, 10 cores essentially. That comes down to about $60,000 for annually for an OCP solution, just for like licensing and fees or services. So that's still a very customizable number. Like I can't put that as a fixed solution for all of them, right? Because it will vary a lot with the kind of solution you want to build with it. But how I would approach this is depending on what kind of expertise and where you want to go, the solutions the cost may vary. So if I, as a customer, I am today, and let's say I have some particular VM deployments and I want to go towards a cloud agnostic approach, then I would automatically go towards OpenShift instead of EKS, AKS, GKE, because that's the use case. In terms of learning, like both of the platforms have equal cost of learning. In terms of costing, OpenShift may come out a little bit more expensive because of its cloud agnostic and managed approach compared to EKS, which is a bit more hands-off approach.
Thank you, Sparsh. Yeah, I think we covered most of the questions. Last few questions. Will the customers need to assign the whole OpenShift cluster to Runtime Fabric? What is the level of role-based access details are available?
No, that's one of the biggest change which we are doing with OpenShift release. And actually, it's not just going to be OpenShift. It's going to be any deployments, whether it's EKS, AKS, GKE, or OpenShift. One of the major enhancements which we are doing with this release is Runtime Fabric will be a namespace level deployment. So what that means is you specify the namespaces, which basically exists in the Runtime Fabric ecosystem, and Runtime Fabric won't know anything beyond that. What that also means is you will have to create those namespaces before. So a bit of a hand holding from the customer's point of view, because you have to now create all these namespaces. You have to kind of feel, we are kind of understanding how the role binding and aspects are. So like all of those need to be pre-created before Runtime Fabric is installed, because as soon as we reduce the permissions needed by Runtime Fabric, which is a very important aspect where customers don't want to give Runtime Fabric a full access of cluster, then Runtime Fabric kind of needs some things pre-built, right? So that it limits its access to only the limited namespaces. So that is going to be the release for with GA beyond OpenShift. So you can think of it something like you go to the particular Runtime Fabric configuration, as Edward was doing over here in that particular YAML, or up in a different configuration, you specify the list of namespaces, which become the Mule application deployment namespaces. And Runtime Fabric will actually expect that it already has, or like there are role bindings out there which it can leverage now for those particular namespaces to deploy applications to them. It won't know anything beyond that. So for example, you have 100 namespaces in your cluster, but you only specify 5 to your particular Runtime Fabric operator or operand. Then Runtime Fabric will not know anything, not able to read, not able to write, none of that about the 95 namespaces in that cluster.
And to add to that, we are putting together some instructions and some augmented documentation around how to restrict what applications get deployed onto what nodes, because that's something that in Kubernetes and in OpenShift, there are selectors, there are tolerations, taints, things like that that you can use to direct applications to only run on specific nodes. So we are working on putting together some documentation for that as well.
Great. There was a question around auto scaling. Are we going to support horizontal pod auto scaling in Runtime Fabric OpenShift?
In future, yes. So not as of today. We won't have HPA or VPA in with the GA, but it is definitely something which is on our roadmap. Uh, don't ask me for dates. I won't be able to share them right now. But essentially, it is something which is coming out to be one of the most important aspects, right? Just because of the customer base that Render Fabric is going towards. We are going towards more of the enterprises and medium to large customers who want that flexibility. And it is something which is coming in hot as well. But yeah, it is something which will be added very soon, but not with GA.
Great. Hey, Sparsh, I think we got one more good question. Do we have any existing customers using RTF appliance model planning to migrate to OpenShift? And what is the possible feasible approach here for migration? Could you talk on that a little bit?
Yep. Funny thing that we already have a lot of our enterprises who are currently appliance users migrating towards OpenShift. Not that they are already doing it because the product is not out, but they are already kind of playing around with OpenShift and kind of familiarizing themselves with OpenShift to kind of onboard to move over from appliance to Runtime Fabric on OpenShift as soon as we GA. Now, in terms of the migration guidelines, some of the things to be aware of is there will not be a button in UX that you should expect that, okay, I click a button and my applications get transferred. That is something which will not be there. So there should be still some understanding that, okay, some level of migration needs to be from the customer's point of view. What aspects I would say are the most important to understand over here is the ops center which is there will will be like OpenShift control plane, which Edward was showing you, will be the replacement for ops center. So essentially, when you migrate kind of similar kind of configurations or controls that you were able to see in ops center, you will be able to see in OpenShift control plane. Another thing is there won't be controller node configuration required for OpenShift. So like today with appliance, you have to have 3 controller nodes and a number of worker nodes. So controller node requirement will go away with OpenShift. Other aspects would be like one of the things which I can kind of go back to is you can always back up your applications and kind of have the cluster set up on the OpenShift side and then restore your runtime fabric. So that backup and restore can still, and all the other Kubernetes solutions, right? Like we have Valero, so you can use that too if you want backup as a service. So RDS-CTL definitely is a proprietary solution that we provide you to backup and restore, but you can use Valero as well. So you can back up your applications, runtime fabric, all of that, and then create a new cluster on the OpenShift side and kind of restore that. So that's also a possibility, but that's probably what's going to be the migration story. One additional thing over there to understand is the Kubernetes knowledge required for OpenShift and appliance is going to be similar. There won't be a big, huge difference over there. What will be an additional cost is the licensing cost, because as soon as you move over from appliance to OpenShift, OCP, or ROSA, there will be additional cost incurred with OpenShift, which appliance doesn't have because it's out of the box.
Thanks, Parsh. And I think we covered all the OpenShift questions. There is one future roadmap question from Valdez. What is the roadmap for supporting RTF on Anthos? There is some GKE versions that are not supported with Anthos. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, actually, I was reading about that. It's maybe we can kind of understand what that means. That Anthos has a particular GKE version that does not currently support RTF because GK like currently Runtime Fabric is supported on GKE for 1.22, and I checked that Anthos supports GKE which runs on 1.22 Kubernetes version. So I wasn't sure what that exactly means. But when it comes to a direct and native integration of Runtime Fabric with Anthos, uh, that is something which we don't have in the roadmap for FY23, but essentially is one of the solutions which we are thinking after. So currently it's not there. There is a ideas portal idea on it. So I think everybody has access to the MuleSoft ideas portal. You can always go there and upload that idea. We are kind of measuring customer requirements and feedback all like every day kind of as they come in. So depending on how big of a push comes from the Anthos world, we can definitely kind of include that further.
Great. Okay, I think we covered all of the questions, Parsh, and thank you for patiently answering all the questions. Edward, for your time, for demoing us the OpenShift capability. Really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for logging in
My
today
pleasure.
and asking all the questions. Have a good day, everyone. The recording will be posted in the next 24 hours. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you all for
Thanks,
joining.
everyone.